include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. The United Nations is facing a severe financial crisis and could run out of money by July unless member states pay overdue contributions, Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned. He said the situation threatens program delivery and differs from past crises. Cost-cutting measures are already underway, including reduced heating and disabled escalators at UN offices. Only 77% of assessed contributions were paid in 2025, leaving a record shortfall. The United States, the UN's largest contributor, withheld its regular budget payment and reduced peacekeeping funding, citing concerns over effectiveness and priorities. Guterres urged members to meet their obligations or reform funding rules. President Trump said he will not share details of his plans for dealing with Iran, even with close regional allies, as the U.S. increases military pressure while keeping diplomatic channels open. Washington has deployed a major naval force, including the USS Abraham Lincoln, to push Tehran toward a new nuclear deal. President Trump said revealing plans could undermine diplomacy, while Iranian officials signaled talks remain possible. Iran's leadership stressed it is not seeking war, despite unrest at home and U.S. warnings of harsher action. President Trump said he prefers diplomacy, but warned future strikes could be far more severe. The U.S. federal government entered a partial shutdown early Saturday after Democrats and Republicans deadlocked over immigration policy. Several major departments, including Homeland Security, State, Treasury, and Transportation, lost funding, while others remained financed. The dispute centers on Democrats' demands to overhaul immigration enforcement following fatal shootings by ICE agents in Minneapolis. Senate Democrats pushed to block Homeland Security funding unless reforms were included. Although the Senate passed a 5-bill funding package, the House must vote again, delaying approval until lawmakers return from recess. The shutdown follows last fall's record 43-day shutdown, which ended in November. Major power outages hit several Ukrainian cities in neighboring Moldova after a technical failure on shared power lines caused a cascading grid shutdown, officials said. Blackouts affected Kyiv, Zhytomyr, and Kharkiv regions, disrupting water supplies and temporarily halting Kyiv's subway. Moldova, including its capital, also lost power. The outage followed weeks of Russian strikes in Ukraine's energy infrastructure during an unusually harsh winter. President Trump said Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to a temporary pause in strikes on Kyiv during extreme cold, though details remain unclear. Talks among U.S., Russian, and Ukrainian officials are expected soon. A U.S. envoy arrived in Venezuela on January 31st, resuming diplomatic engagement after a 7-year break. Laura F. Dogu, the chargé d'affaires to the Venezuela Affairs Unit, said her team was ready to work, marking a shift following President Trump's January operation to capture Nicolas Maduro. Since then, Washington has engaged with Maduro's deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, now acting president. Venezuelan officials said talks would focus on bilateral issues and resolving differences through dialogue. The visit aligns with a U.S.-led transitional plan involving oil transfers, economic opening, and political reconciliation as interim authorities release prisoners and consider amnesties. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage spoke about the incarceration of British citizen Jimmy Lai in China.
Well, I don't think we should be doing any trade deals until a British citizen, Jimmy Lai, is let out of prison. You know, the fact that a guy on Hong Kong who ran a free press, it wasn't propaganda, it was a free press sheet, has now been kept for 5 years in solitary confinement in Hong Kong. This is a British citizen. It is the job of British governments to stand up and defend them. So before we sign anything, let's free people like him.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
Anticipate potential delays for the morning commute. In other news, a recent government report on prescription drug pricing points to corporate
Freedom of the press is about your right to know.
What are you talking about, man? Look at his stats.
It's about your right to be informed. Your right to access all types of information keeps us free as a nation.
No.
Today, there are real threats to press freedom.
Reaching residential areas by...
And your right to know about the world around us.
Look.
Some threats are obvious, some are easy to miss, but they all put our way of life at risk. We must defend against all of these threats, no matter what kind of news is important to you.
Justified putting American troops in harm's way?
That's a great question.
We must protect our right to know before it's too late. Understand the threats. ProtectPressFreedom.org.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Makers are facing more travel.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, The World Today.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Welcome back to The World Today. It's the start of a new week. I don't know about you, I don't know if I like Mondays or not, but let's get through this one. We got a brilliant guest on today, a whole bunch of them, and nice to have your company too. The Honourable Senator Margaret Reynolds was Senator for Queensland from 1983 to 1999, representing the Australian Labor Party. Now, she held ministerial office in the Hawke government as Minister for Local Government 1987 to 1990, and Minister assisting the Prime Minister for the Status of Women 1988 to 1990. Margaret Reynolds has a long commitment to the peace movement, dating back to the anti-Vietnam moratorium to current efficacy against militarism as National President of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She taught human rights and international relations at University of Queensland from 1999 to 2004 and has worked with a number of international non-government organisations. We talked to Margaret today about the impending visit to Australia of Israel's president, and why there is such strong opposition to this visit. Should Anthony Albanese have issued this invitation in the first place? All the while, the visa cancellations, by the way, are being made, and what purpose do they serve the government? First of all, I'm going to say hello to the Honourable Senator Margaret Reynolds. Margaret, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Well, of course, the initial invitation did not come from the Prime Minister. It was made privately by one of the Jewish organisations after the tragedy of Bondi. And that invitation from a private organisation is entirely different to an official state visit. So that's the first thing that we have to be clear on. If President Herzog was visiting as an individual to share with the Jewish community and others the grief of a period of mourning, that's over there in the private space. But a state visit is another thing entirely. And I'd like to just read a very brief statement that says, the process of inviting a head of state to address the Parliament involves careful diplomatic coordination and is considered an honour extended to Australia's closest partners. Well, at the moment, while Australia and Israel have been very close allies, partners, if you like, in the past, the last 2 years, and the fact that the Netanyahu regime has been guilty of absolutely ignoring international law and committing war crimes, etc., etc. And we've heard all this not just from the International Court of Justice, but from many, many countries around the world. So it's not a good time for Australia, a small middle power, a state, a country that supports international law, helped build the United Nations system of international law, to be associating with President Herzog at this time because of what he represents in terms of how the government of Israel is acting today.
Tell me this: is the PM right about the reason for? You mentioned the invite and things like that, but he's saying it's going to unite and engage the Jewish community.
Well, the Jewish Council of Australia. I mean, like any community, the Jewish community is diverse. I mean, just as you would say that, not all Catholics agree in Australia, or not all Anglicans, or not all Muslims. I mean, the Jewish community is diverse, and the Jewish Council itself has written directly to the government, urging them to cancel the visit. So while on one hand, yes, some Jewish organisations are very pleased that President Herzog is coming, but others, like the Jewish Council, say, well, it's not the time. It's not a time for, given the ongoing murder of civilians during a ceasefire. It's not surprising that many, many, many thousands of Australians cannot look kindly on President Herzog's visit as a head of state, given what has been happening over the last 2 years or more, and what is continuing, even though there is supposed to be a ceasefire.
Can you tell me which, if you could just mention some of the Jewish groups, because we know a couple that are not all that keen on President Herzog visiting Australia. Which are some of those Jewish groups?
Well, the Jewish Council of Australia, headed up by Sarah Schwartz, has been very prominent in advocating effectively for Israel as a democratic state to return to the international community and respect international law. But unfortunately, the current leader of the state of Israel just ignores international law, and of course has been named accordingly as a war criminal.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. What's your views on the hate speech laws? Just sitting in this chair, I don't give a rat's what they're going to do to me, but it does create the awareness that we, all those here, and anybody that comes on to criticise the Israeli government or a visit by a president from Israel to Australia, we could be snaffled or nabbed as for hate speech and for anti-Semitism. Do you think that's part of the? Do you think it's part of the whole look of this to make it look like that? If you say anything against the Jewish people
Yes.
or the Jewish government, you are going to be in all sorts of trouble.
Yes. Look, that is the perception. That is the perception. And people are naturally nervous, worried, intimidated, and some will act accordingly. Those of us who look closely at legislation and our law will know that our federal court has actually ruled that being critical of a government of Israel is not anti-Semitic. What has happened over the last 2 years is that many Australians have rallied, and there have been physical rallies. People have written letters. They've lobbied parliamentarians to try to get Australia the Australian government to take a stronger stand based on international law in speaking up against the way the Netanyahu government has behaved in response to, yes, the bad terror attack by Hamas. But in his response, he's gone way beyond responding to that atrocity and simply doubled down on creating many, many, many more atrocities, as we know from the destruction of Gaza and the murder, effectively, of so many civilians. And the numbers of children who have died or been totally disabled, lost limbs, is an absolute not just a national tragedy, it's an international tragedy.
Yeah, it's even the IDF saying that at least 70,000 were killed, but those that are maimed would have to be 5-6 times that amount, and they're innocents. And to me, the hate speech is going to be used by some as a way of stopping people's right to protest. And ever since Ned Kelly rode around on a horse with a rubbish bin on his head, he looked like he was. But we have been able to criticise and have protest, peaceful protests, of course, but protests could be vibrant, could be a bit boisterous, but it's peaceful. That's part of that's inherently our right to be Australians, isn't it? And to use these laws to, like Chris Minns, well, we're not going to have any, when Herzog's here, we're not going to have any protests. I mean, how rough.
Sorry, Chris Minns. Look, I have been in government. I understand that when you're in government and when you're in charge, you want everything to be well managed, yes, even controlled, because you're in charge and you want your government and your policies to be in the best interests of the community. And of course, things go wrong and you cannot control everything. And in this case, I'm sorry, Chris Minns, but whether or not there are lawful rallies or lawful marches, there will be what a number of people are promoting, silent vigils of shame, where Australians, wherever they are and whatever they're doing, will simply organise to stand silently, probably wearing black, because they are ashamed that Australia has made this an official state visit when this particular administration in Israel is openly accused of genocide. And there hasn't been a final ruling from the International Court of Justice, but there has been a ruling on war crimes, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and a number of other factors.
How can Anthony Albanese and Chris Minns, because Chris Minns is acting, I mean, the only free speech you'll have is that we afford you. Go get stuffed.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just ludicrous. But anyway, I mean, it is. Who does Chris Minns think he is?
Look, I have some empathy for both Chris Minns and the Prime Minister, because the attack in Bondi was unprecedented, and it was such a shock to us all. It was a tragedy for that community, the Jewish community, and others directly affected, and of course for the families and friends, it was a tragedy. But for all of us, it was, more of as much a tragedy, because it was a wake-up call to us that, hey, this sort of atrocity can occur in Australia at our iconic beach. So I understand that both Chris Minns and the Prime Minister have been shocked and worried and traumatized to the extent of thinking, quick, we've got to do something. But they need advice. They need advice from calm, rational people who are just out there, who know the law, who understand international law, who understand diplomacy, and that you cannot just have a knee-jerk reaction, which I think is this is what all of this is part of. I mean, I personally, and you're asking my opinion, so I emphasize it is my opinion. I think that probably, certainly, the Prime Minister was, if not pushed, but certainly guided into the invitation. The invitation had already been issued by the Jewish community, and that's fine. I've got no argument with that, because that would be private. That would be, it would be like me inviting my friends from the other side of the world to visit me in Australia. I understand that in terms of the grief of the Jewish community. But what I don't understand is why the Prime Minister, or at least one of his advisors, said, fine, we will assist in whatever way is necessary to expedite, I don't know, visa, transport, security even. But that would only be for a private visit for the Jewish community. We now have a state visit, and I've got here, I've got the itinerary for the 4 days that includes Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne, and includes a number of official events. That is what Australians are angry about. They're not angry that about a private visit. A private visit would have been up to the president and his staff and his Jewish community. But this has become an official state visit to Australia, and we don't have that many state visits to Australia. We've had several US presidents visit and speak in the Parliament. We've had the President of Ireland come to the New South Wales Parliament. We've had the Chinese president come to the Australian Parliament. But these are well planned, well in advance, lots of discussion and diplomacy about what this visit means. And I don't think this has happened in this instance. I think a private visit has unfortunately turned into an official visit.
Can you tell me how much Albanese is on the nose at the moment to the rank and file of the ALP?
Look,
sorry about that.
I don't. You're talking to a long-term member of the Labor Party, someone who joined in her 20s and is still a Labor Party member. I know Anthony Albanese, and he is he's a good, thoughtful human being. And if everybody had the opportunity to sit down and talk with him, they would agree with me, I'm sure. However, he has been unprepared for this crisis, this international crisis, where, a former friendly country behaves in the way, well, it's not the country that behaves, it's the current government, or the fact that Netanyahu himself has responded, sent in the IDF and just destroyed Gaza. Not to mention, of course, the terrible suffering of so many thousands of Palestinians. So I think the Prime Minister and certainly the Premier are simply unprepared for such a major international crisis. I mean, this period in our history will be considered long into the future because it is a total breakdown of international law by a former very reputable state.
Just quickly, your views on the president of the entire galaxy, Donald Trump, and his peace plan. And are they going to call it the Gaza Club? 1 billion you can join. I mean, sorry, I'm being a bit frivolous, but I can't really approach this any other way because it does remind me of a private club. First a golf course, a place to park your yachts, and then a place where you can rape and pillage. And that's about it. What's your views on his peace plan? And I see there's a group of Middle Eastern countries that are putting their hand up, but, but the majority are not.
Look, a lot of Western countries are not joining, and I think the consensus in Australia, if there can ever be a consensus on such a complicated decision, would be that Australia should not join the board. However, my view is that thank you, President Trump, for the ceasefire and for your contribution in getting the ceasefire of a sort, but you haven't prevented the deaths and the starvation and the ongoing just extreme inhumanitarian treatment of a whole group of a large population. But if we're going to have something like a peace plan, and even if you must call it a Trump peace plan, it has to go through the proper processes of the United Nations and the international system. We have spent since the 1940s, the terrible period of the Second World War, the Holocaust. Out of that came a need for an international system of law and compliance with law. And the United Nations, for all its criticism, and it gets too much criticism for the best efforts it can make, because the United Nations can only do what nation states allow it to do. But if President Trump had come up with this idea that he wanted to be part of it, and he'd said he would work with the United Nations, I would have, I don't know if I would have nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, but at least I would have given him full credit for trying to retrieve a terrible situation and work for something that would bring peace to the region. While he's working with whoever volunteers, look, maybe they will do some good, but I guess knowing that statement that was made some months ago about turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, I think most of us have a right to be very dubious and very suspicious of President Trump's motives.
Just tell me quickly as we wind this up, because I can almost hear the popping of the champagne bottle. Maybe not. Half your luck, by the way. How do we move forward?
It's not in my house.
You said you're ALP, so I don't believe that at all. If you give us a bit quick, can you just tell me though, how do we move forward? Because at the moment, governments who should not be on the nose about this are on the nose. We have premiers deciding that they're going to rewrite our rights, what we can say and what we can do. We have the atrocities that need to be pushed, and people need to be held accountable, because there is no excuse, no reason, it's a criminal offence to go killing and maiming hundreds of thousands of people. How do we move forward? Because at the moment, we have legacy media doing their bit to, especially the Murdoch media, taking sides. There are no sides to be taken here. You have one, first of all, you have the atrocities, and whether that happened in Gaza or whether it happened in Europe or on Mars, anywhere, that is a crime, first of all. So we have to have those people held accountable. If the IDF says there are more than 70,000 people that were killed in the conflict, and who knows how many others, but I would probably multiply that by 4 that have been maimed. If we have all those, we had a government in Australia, federal government, that were pushing for all the, sort of good things, bring it to the attention and let's do something about it. And because of and it was a terrible, terrible mass murder in Bondi, they seem to have dropped the bundle. Everybody's become the Prime Minister. Everybody's become a bit like COVID, isn't it? Everyone's become an expert. Instead of saying, let's look at the facts as they are. Innocent people have been killed. The idea acknowledge that. So let's also hold those people accountable. And then let's then bring this country together. If you want to have a march and peaceful, if you want to have a protest, do it, because it is your right. When we have premiers becoming as I said, the high court or the executioner almost, they should butt out. I mean, he can't even build a tunnel. It's leaking and it's all falling down on top of things. So he should worry about, I was going to say his backyard, but in his case, other people's backyards. So how do we move forward? Because at the moment, we're like this whirlpool of I won't say filth, but ignorance is probably a good term.
Well, look, I think many of us have great faith in the Royal Commission and Justice Virginia Bell, who will be heading that up. It will focus, on, of course, on the tragedy of Bondi, anti-Semitism and social cohesion. I hope that Royal Commission focuses much more on prevention and bringing people together, and less on trying to continually say the right thing, do the right thing from one perspective. And this is where governments and leaders are accused of hypocrisy. And my last word on this would be, you have a terrible situation in Ukraine, and people have been killed, people have suffered and are continuing to suffer. What if we had woken up one morning, as we did in this case just before Christmas, and discovered that President Putin was invited to visit Australia? We would just say that couldn't happen. And that is why, the fact that President Herzog is visiting Australia in these circumstances of the last few years, that people are just saying, how can this be? What is our Prime Minister and others who've supported it? The best thing that the Prime Minister could do now would be to make a small concession, and it would only be a small concession because a lot is already planned and will happen anyway. I don't see him cancelling the visit, but he could not welcome him to the Parliament, because that is, there are all sorts of reasons I've tried to outline why this is an inappropriate official visit at this time. But to have the president of this particular state at this time welcome to our Parliament is an absolute outrage, and will be a stain on Australia's reputation for many, many years to come.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree and totally agree. Well done. So when are you heading back to politics? We need you. We need you. You were the good ones.
I hope I was one of the good ones. In some people's estimation, I was one of the bad ones. But my husband is a writer, and we used to have this joke that I was the activist and he was the armchair critic. Now I have to confess I'm the armchair critic, and all I can do is talk and write and hope that somebody takes some notice one of these days.
We do, and I love what you have to say and have the utmost respect for you. Thank you very much to the Honourable Senator Margaret Reynolds. Coming up next, we'll pop over to either Bali or Thailand. This is The World Today.
Our mission at Pets of the Homeless is really simple, and that's to keep vulnerable people and their pets together when they're going through a tough time. Back in 2015, Pets of the Homeless started with a 20-kilo bag of dog food, made it into small packs, put it in a suitcase, and it was just me walking down the streets of Melbourne, one woman on a mission to make a difference. I would share the story on social media.
We've just hit 100,000 meals distributed today.
And the community really responded positively, and it just grew from there.
My name is Kent, and this is Hippo. She's everything to me. She's such a good girl. I got her at a time when I wasn't very stable. I'd come out of prison, I was homeless, but as soon as I got her, I just realised, oh my God, I can't let this dog go. And she's just my best friend. Hippo had a canine equivalent of an ACL injury. I knew there was something really desperately wrong. It was agonising seeing her suffering. My caseworker put me in touch with Pets of the Homeless, and Yvonne said that they could help, and I was just so overjoyed. I wouldn't have been able to get through that medical incident without their help. Like, it just would have been impossible.
That bond between us and our pet is very important, and when someone is going through a really tough time in their life, that bond becomes even more important, and that's what we're trying to protect at Pets of the Homeless.
Who's that? Who's that?
My favourite quote is, I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realised I was somebody. My intention wasn't to actually start a charity, it was to help. It was just putting one foot in front of another, and that's how we got to where we are today. We're now in a warehouse. We have about 150 volunteers. We provide on average about 60 to 70,000 meals every single month. We have a network of about 73 community partner organisations that we work with. We've also taken in hundreds of pets into our foster care program, and we've just reached 2.5 million meals distributed.
In the time that I've been volunteering with Pets of the Homeless, I've seen the community grow, numbers of volunteers, pet food packing, got a brand new van, and we can reach more community pantries and reach more people. The community, whether it's the volunteers who are packing the food, who are foster caring, they've got so much love to give.
I think Pets of the Homeless gives people hope. There can be a bit of judgment for people who are homeless and have a dog, but the reality is those dogs have got love and support, and it's so wonderful that Pets of the Homeless are able to help. It really makes a big difference in actual lives. It's really important work.
To the people who have supported Pets of the Homeless over the last 10 years, thank you from the bottom of my heart. There's so many kind people out there, and I'm just grateful for all of them. The work that we need to do is so huge and the need is growing, and we can't do it without the support of our community.
We're today's news talk, The World Today.
And welcome back. Epstein, it just doesn't go away. It's like that terrible bad stain, but much deadlier. More Epstein documents were dropped last week. Now, much of it has been redacted, but there are some nuggets of information. For example, Epstein's close associates, his global network, his job description, and his modus operandi does become very clear with each drop. However, many questions remain. Why is so much still being hidden by the admin? Are there charges pending against anyone for illegal activity? And there's a huge cover-up ongoing involving senior figures from past and present law enforcement agencies. Now, where is Congress? I think they're all hiding. Well, Kim will probably agree. You can see his head just about nodding, coming off his shoulders. But where are they in all of this? does suspicion fall on Trump now? I can see he's nodding again very hard. He'll have it cause himself an injury in a second. But does it fall on Trump and those he is protecting? Joachim Hagopian is a West Point graduate, former Army officer and author of Don't Let the Bastards Get You Down. Now, after the military, he earned a master's degree in clinical psychology and worked as a licensed therapist. As an independent journo for over 8 years, he's written hundreds of articles for many news sites such as Global Research, LouRockwell.com, and the Government Rag. Joachim, thanks for joining us from somewhere in Asia. I've put down, again, Bali, but you haven't finished your holiday. Half your luck. What's your thoughts? I think you would be saying that the noose is getting tighter around a particular president's neck.
Well, it's uncomfortable. They released, over 3,000 pages of the Epstein files. And his name's in it, along with a few other rather well-known people. But if you kind of look closely, it's like, they say, this is the DOJ releasing it, and it's Todd Blanche, who's the assistant attorney general. And he makes this claim that, well, we have these FBI tips here, but, you can't believe any of it, because it's all unconfirmed, blah, 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 And then when they do release the names of rather famous people like Elon Musk and, of course, Donald Trump, it's like there's nothing that is evidentiary of guilt. They make sure of that, of course. So it just is, it's to whet the appetite for the demand by the public to see some results in these long promised Epstein files that have been dragged out and held back for, it was like a month and a half after their deadline that Trump signed the transparency law order to release it. After a month and a half, we get, half of what they still have. There's another 3 million pages of these Epstein files that they have chosen not to release. And they're saying that, okay, this big trove you got now is all you're getting because we're not releasing anymore. They've already made that clear. So it's obvious that they very carefully screened everything that is going public, and they are still withholding 3 million pages of Epstein files that aren't going to go public. So, it's just to basically placate the masses that are demanding for, disclosure, which is never coming. I mean, the bottom line, it's also come out, and I've even written about this in the long past, but the Department of Justice has made deals over the years, with a 2005 investigation, 2008 conviction for, soliciting underage. And then finally down the road, the 2019 incident, and then they get rid of him, of course. Oh, he's probably living, breathing in Israel, being protected, of course. Because, boy, they're still using the sexual blackmail on Donald Trump. Israel is blackmailing Trump, and that's why probably there's going to be World War III with Iran and every other place that we're in a hot spot with. So my point is that they carefully screened everything, and it's not going to prove that there's going to be any kind of conviction. And the point that I was just making was there have been deals made with the Department of Justice. This is going back, 25 years, where these are basically the child rapists that Epstein served. They have deals with the federal government that they're not going to be pursued legally. They're off the hook and they're above the law. And so, we need to get to the bottom of that, because that's a scandal in and of itself, that they're protecting these pedophiles that are hugely powerful in this country. Trump is just one of them.
Bill Gates is here at the moment. He's visiting our Prime Minister. I could imagine the handshake. It'd be like that. They're both such butch gentlemen. But it came out that Bill Gates had contacted a Russian hooker and contracted something that you get from hookers. And he was, and that was Bill Gates with Epstein himself talking about it. It's very murky. It's very dirty. It almost makes you feel like you don't want to even read it because you think that all this will stick to you like a skunk smell. It will stick to you, and you can't get rid of it. The 3 million pages. I mean, that's a lot of pages, by the way. But the 3 million pages that won't be released, do you think the American people will settle for that?
Well, if there's World War III to take its place, yeah, I think they will. And I think that they're always flooding new, quote, breaking stories, basically as cover ups to, not go after the Epstein files. I mean, every week there's 3 or 4 major breaks that are used as misdirection to, keep the public focused on other things other than Trump and Epstein. And by the way, I mentioned the 25 to 29 powerful people that are protected by the federal government, and they've already made deals with them. This was released by Ghislaine Maxwell. This was recently released by herself. And another thing, they released these 3 million. Who's going to go through 3 million pages? Nobody. I doubt if anybody on earth will actually cover every 3 million page there is. And that's another, motive on their part to try and just engulf the masses with so much and then end up with nothing. And that's the ultimate goal and outcome of this latest batch.
And Steve Bannon refers to Epstein as Satan. In your own words and your thoughts, give us an overall what you know of Epstein, what's hasn't been released, without getting me sued or thrown in jail, would be most appreciative, by the way. But give us your view, because everyone's talking about a bit of Epstein, a bit of Trump, and a bit of this, and a bit of that, a bit of sexually transmitted disease, a bit of that, and all that sort of stuff. But let's look at the guy that is regarded as, from Steve Bannon, as Satan, Epstein.
Yeah. Well, he's certainly been, lifted up in life by powerful people, and it starts with him being a college dropout and then being invited to a Manhattan primo school for the rich as some kind of teacher. And then 2 years later, he hardly is there. 2 years later, Bear Stearns, the investment company, hires him. So there's connections that go deep. And, this guy's, even after he was convicted, back in 2008, as a, registered sex offender against children, even after that, the Rothschilds are embracing him. He had relationships with Ariane de Rothschild and Linda Rothschild. The Rothschild family is making deals with Epstein. This is all documented by my own articles in 2023. So obviously, the top echelons of power have taking care of this guy to make sure that the word's not getting out there, and any child rapists that are affiliated and associated with him are also going to be protected. That's the bottom line. We've seen it for over 20 years now, since the investigation originally started in 2005. Nobody goes to jail yet. He knows everybody in the scientific community, He knows the banking, Rothschilds, in all the top echelons of power. He had personal relationships, friendships with, and royalty, etc. And nobody goes to jail. Gee, I wonder why.
But here's something. El said on our chat, and he said, and you know a lot about this bloke, this guy, this gentleman. No, he's not a gentleman. He's a creep, Satan. But he says Epstein is still alive, and there's a bit of that going around. I don't think he is. I think he's gone to meet his father in hell. But what do you think? And is there a chance?
I have suspicion that he is still alive. Unfortunately, they did wheel a guy out that had a completely different nose that's supposed to be Epstein back in 2019 August when he supposedly died, committed suicide. Uh, I'm kind of on the fence. I mean, probably he is protected and living in Israel, but there's a good chance that they murdered him. There were attempts on his life even prior to the August 19th event where he supposedly died. Uh, so it's we don't know for sure, but there will always be suspicion that he could be alive, and even more so, people believe that he was murdered. And hardly anybody that knows anything believes he committed suicide.
Okay, now we got that's right, sort of hanging around. If it's terrible humour of mine, but he's a creep, this guy. But I see that a lot of those multi-billionaires and all those the elite, don't come near me, you'll get something. They were all very good friends, and if they did release those 3 million pages, who knows? Can I ask you? Okay, here's two questions. So we've got about 2 minutes. What needs to be done, but what do you think will be done?
Yeah, what should be done and what will be done are always different from each other. Um, the public needs to not give up and demand justice and raise hell as much as they can, and bring out the evidence of the victims, uh, and do it in a way that's anonymous yet and protecting them. Yet, you know, there are victims that are ready to go public and name names, but they need to be protected. And the system does not protect victims. A whole history of them dying young and all of that. I mean, Virginia Giuffre, she went back in April of last year. Suicide, another suicide. Anyway, yeah, and so I have my doubts. I've done years and years of research on this very topic and written 5 books on it. And not one person that reaches the parliamentary or Congress level or higher ever goes to jail for pedophilic crimes. Not one. And that's in all the major countries of the world. Not one has gone for that reason. So do I think that it's suddenly going to change after history has shown that the rich and powerful live in a total different world, immune from prosecution, above the law? It's always been that way, you know? And so I think you have to be rather naive to think that it's going to change and suddenly there will be justice done. And all these powerful rapists will go to jail. I think you have to be pretty naive to still believe that. Obviously, millions and billions of people probably want that, but I just based on history, not going to happen.
Isn't it interesting if a lot of them profess to believe in God, if they're not God themselves, which most of them think they are at times, do, like twins. But if they believe in God, they're going to meet God fairly soon. And I mean, it doesn't do the people walking around on planet Earth much chop, but it does at least you know that at the end of the day, all those terrible things they did to those innocent people and destroyed lives, people died, and it goes on, they will get their comeuppance.
That's why they're so much into transhumanism and preserving life as long as they can. They are deathly afraid of death because they know what's coming in hell.
I totally agree. Well, Kim, great chatting with you. Wasn't long enough today, but we got caught up. Thank you for your time. If somebody wants to find out more about what you do and where you are and that sort of stuff, and Fred, your water buffalo, how do they do that?
Okay, thegovernmentrag.com has all my articles along with jameshfetzer.org. And you can find every chapter of all my 5 books on pedophilia and empire at pedoempire.org.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. And hopefully we can do this again next week. This is The World Today. Coming up next, The Protagonist.
This will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. The United Nations is facing a severe financial crisis and could run out of money by July unless member states pay overdue contributions, Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned. He said the situation threatens program delivery and differs from past crises. Cost-cutting measures are already underway, including reduced heating and disabled escalators at UN offices. Only 77% of assessed contributions were paid in 2025, leaving a record shortfall. The United States, the UN's largest contributor, withheld its regular budget payment and reduced peacekeeping funding, citing concerns over effectiveness and priorities. Guterres urged members to meet their obligations or reform funding rules. President Trump said he will not share details of his plans for dealing with Iran, even with close regional allies, as the U.S. increases military pressure while keeping diplomatic channels open. Washington has deployed a major naval force, including the USS Abraham Lincoln, to push Tehran toward a new nuclear deal. President Trump said revealing plans could undermine diplomacy, while Iranian officials signaled talks remain possible. Iran's leadership stressed it is not seeking war, despite unrest at home and U.S. warnings of harsher action. President Trump said he prefers diplomacy, but warned future strikes could be far more severe. The U.S. federal government entered a partial shutdown early Saturday after Democrats and Republicans deadlocked over immigration policy. Several major departments, including Homeland Security, State, Treasury, and Transportation, lost funding, while others remained financed. The dispute centers on Democrats' demands to overhaul immigration enforcement following fatal shootings by ICE agents in Minneapolis. Senate Democrats pushed to block Homeland Security funding unless reforms were included. Although the Senate passed a 5-bill funding package, the House must vote again, delaying approval until lawmakers return from recess. The shutdown follows last fall's record 43-day shutdown, which ended in November. Major power outages hit several Ukrainian cities in neighboring Moldova after a technical failure on shared power lines caused a cascading grid shutdown, officials said. Blackouts affected Kyiv, Zhytomyr, and Kharkiv regions, disrupting water supplies and temporarily halting Kyiv's subway. Moldova, including its capital, also lost power. The outage followed weeks of Russian strikes in Ukraine's energy infrastructure during an unusually harsh winter. President Trump said Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to a temporary pause in strikes on Kyiv during extreme cold, though details remain unclear. Talks among U.S., Russian, and Ukrainian officials are expected soon. A U.S. envoy arrived in Venezuela on January 31st, resuming diplomatic engagement after a 7-year break. Laura F. Dogu, the chargé d'affaires to the Venezuela Affairs Unit, said her team was ready to work, marking a shift following President Trump's January operation to capture Nicolas Maduro. Since then, Washington has engaged with Maduro's deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, now acting president. Venezuelan officials said talks would focus on bilateral issues and resolving differences through dialogue. The visit aligns with the U.S.-led transitional plan involving oil transfers, economic opening, and political reconciliation as interim authorities release prisoners and consider amnesties. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage spoke about the incarceration of British citizen Jimmy Lai in China.
Well, I don't think we should be doing any trade deals until a British citizen, Jimmy Lai, is let out of prison. You know, the fact that a guy on Hong Kong who ran a free press, it wasn't propaganda, it was a free press sheet, has now been kept for 5 years in solitary confinement in Hong Kong. This is a British citizen. It is the job of British governments to stand up and defend them. So before we sign anything, let's free people like him.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old-growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
Anticipate potential delays for the morning commute. In other news, a recent government report on prescription drug pricing points to corporate
Freedom of the press is about your right to know.
Create offenses.
What are you talking about, man? Look at his stats.
Clark sheer athleticism.
It's about your right to be informed. Your right to access all types of information keeps us free as a nation.
No.
Today, there are real threats to press freedom.
Reaching residential areas by...
And your right to know about the world around us.
Look.
Some threats are obvious, some are easy to miss, but they all put our way of life at risk. We must defend against all of these threats, no matter what kind of news is important to you.
Justified putting American troops in harm's way?
That's a great question.
We must protect our right to know before it's too late. Understand the threats. ProtectPressFreedom.org.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Welcome back to The World Today and the Protagonists. Now, there's a lot of talk about data centres, and there should be more. What exactly are data centres or data centres? Now, they're secure, centralised physical facilities that house critical computing infrastructure, including servers, data storage drives, and networking equipment. They are designed to process, store, manage, and disseminate large volumes of data, serving as the backbone for modern digital services, such as cloud computing, websites, and applications for huge technology companies. They're a gold mine for those companies investing into these data centres. Now, there's a major concern amongst thinking Australians that the mega data centres planned and under construction right now in Australia will draw heavily on our already precarious energy and water supplies. Now, sure, there's billions being injected into these very large mammoth data centres, some of which Australian taxpayers will contribute to. Now, we'll talk about the size and location of these projects later with our panel. But do Australians know what the deals are that our governments are signing us up to? A bit like the COVID thing. We'll buy all that poison, basically, or that vaccine, and then, well, we're not going to use it, but we spent billions and billions. And if you look at some of the countries in Europe, they're now having trouble because they actually signed a particular amount of money spent for the vaccine. So are we going to do the same? What if imagine this, the whole AI sector suffers a major crash because the returns on investments don't stand up. Governments are also failing to spell out how the massive use of energy and water resources will be accommodated. Should we not be closing down our power generation facilities? And what about the need for additional energy, which American-owned data centers are already investing in, such as nuclear power stations, small ones? Shouldn't these companies be providing their own power and water supplies? No, we're going to have windmills. We're going to put solar panels. Why aren't we already investing? Makes sense. We've got the uranium in nuclear power generation. We'll talk to our panel about some of these unanswered questions. Our panel, again, friends of the world today, Robbie Barwick, Director of Australian Citizens Party, I got this right? I can't believe it. Yeah, I cannot believe it. I have practiced your name all day, and guess what? Paul Vallejo. He's an ex-NASA aerospace, avionics and nuclear engineer. Ross Johns is president of the Wimmera Mallee Environmental and Agricultural Protection Association. Thank you for joining me. First of all, Robbie, you see governments, they're so excited about these data centers. So excited. But they're not telling us the full story. And if you look at the energy, just say for example, forget all the windmills and power, from those windmills and solar panels. Look at the water, for example. Where are they going to get these natural resources, such as water, to keep these data centers at a reasonable temperature? You should try your microphone. It's that little button that says on. There we go.
Sorry,
right.
Mike. To answer the last question first.
Yes, you can.
I don't know where they're going to get the water from. But I can comment on the enthusiasm of governments for data centers. I think this is a hallmark of governments that I've seen ever since we went down the path of the World Wide Web and the information superhighway, etc. It's every new phase of the technology that comes along. All you get from governments is just manic, unbridled enthusiasm. They madly embrace every aspect of the new technology and bugger the consequences, right? And this happens every single time. And often what happens, like we've seen before and we're seeing it repeated now, there's a bubble builds in these things. The government enthusiasm actually injects capital and air into the bubble. Everyone goes crazy, laying out all the infrastructure, etc., for this new technology that we've all got to embrace. It's so wonderful now. It's AI. There's no there just never seems to be any critical thinking involved, and then it all comes crashing down. But the damage is done, right? The businesses are bankrupt. The natural landscape is deformed to build the infrastructure, etc. And you think, man, when are you governments going to learn? Having been in this political game for over 30 years now, I've seen it from the beginning, and it never ceases to amaze me just how uncritically governments are keen to embrace every new fad that comes along. And to them, it is a fad. Now, there's something substantial about data centers and AI, etc. There's a real world application for it all, but it's not. It doesn't justify the hysterical enthusiasm you get from governments, which then has a pretty significant real world impact.
Paul Vallejo. See, I told you.
Yeah.
It's a mental block. It's just like, duh. But you know more than probably all of us in this room put together. Do you think this government, and they're not alone, other governments are doing the same, do you think they've thought, that's a good idea, we can make a lot of money from this, without sort of working out that you need energy? Now, we haven't got enough energy at the moment in Australia. We have the resources. We've got the coal and we've got the uranium. But we'll ship that overseas. But even overseas, I think China's going to build some of their data centers below the ocean. I don't know what that will do to the environment down there, but it can't be all that great. But it needs to be cooled. So do you think the governments have gone into this thinking, oh, fantastic, we can make a lot of money out of this and we look like we're doing something, and they are. But on the other hand, it's just destroying the environment and could quite possibly destroy that country.
It absolutely makes no sense to chase this fad. If you think about who has a competitive advantage in what it would take to build data centers, you need abundant, reliable energy. You need a cool environment, because the cooler your environment is, the less you have to cool these data centers. You also need cheap, available land and abundant excess water. And none of those things apply to New South Wales or much of Australia. It doesn't make sense to chase this particular fad, particularly because everything is a trade-off. If you take a lot of energy to put to data centers, that means power prices go up, like they did in Oregon after they built data centers there. Power prices went up 50% over 5 years. And then our chokehold on the cost of living and on manufacturing only accelerates. What we really need to do, we really should focus on the big picture. What's good for Australia, and is this particular plan good for Australia? No, it's not.
Ross, from the farmer's point of view, the rush for rare earth minerals and the data centers being plonked all over the place, along with the wind turbines and solar panels that are destroying magnificent country, along with decimating the farming community. What's your views on these data centers? Do you think government thought, what a good idea, but they haven't done a whole lot of planning, and maybe that extra glass of red shouldn't have been consumed when they made their decisions? If you'd like to turn your microphone on too, that would go really well. No, we still haven't got that, so we'll...
Sorry about the teething problems this time, Mike.
Yes, we do have that at the moment. We can't hear you, Ross, so we'll come back to Robbie. Robbie, what do you think in answer to that question?
Yeah, well, I do know, the government has at all levels, a commitment to renewables. And so the two issues are going hand in hand, because we don't have enough energy for data centers. And so you're getting all this renewables rollout. And the way it's being done in Australia is taking away the valuable land that we could be using for farm production, etc. I'm sure Ross will say a lot more about that. And so they're creating another problem. Now, I just want to point out, I recently went to China, Mike, as you know, I've talked about this. I spent 20 days in China and got to see it for the first time. And I found something interesting when I was paying more attention to China as a result of my trip. Because China is very big on AI, like everyone else is. But they seem to be having a very focused, practical application for AI. And the contrast with the United States shows up in the level of investment in data centers, because the figures I've seen is by 2027, the US will have invested something like $700 billion in building data centers, whereas China will have invested about $80 billion. And there seems to be, now, I don't want to generalize too much, but there seems to be much more of a focus of AI that helps to run factories more efficiently, etc., rather than AI that's all about, making revenge porn, driving social media silliness, all this kind of stuff that we get bombarded with at the time. Because every time I see a new AI image on social media, I think that's got to be saved somewhere. or a lot of energy was used in generating that, right? But the discrepancy in the level of investment shows you just how much of a bubble the United States has, and unfortunately, Australia tends to follow along on that side of things. And so I'm sure we're influenced by the bubble in the United States, and like I said before, it's going to drive all this investment in the AI data centers and in the renewables that our government will say, see, these are clean and green data centers because it's all done by renewables, but it will do permanent damage to the landscape to build the damn things. And then one other quick point is, I only just was informed about this recently. The town of Morwell here in Victoria in the Latrobe Valley, that's a town where the power station was closed down. That's the big project for Morwell. They're going to build a data center where there is no power. There used to be a power station there. There is no power station now. They're going to have a data center instead. So they're going to be creating a lot more demand for electricity, and then have to solve the problem about where it's going to come from, whereas they used to have a pretty good power station there. So everything about this, or certainly the government role in it, just seems silly to me.
Can I ask you, Paul, these data centres in Australia, if they're going along the way we are at the moment, don't like nuke, don't like coal, will they ever become sustainable?
No, data centers need reliable and base load power. They can't deal with intermittent spikes in power that you get from the so-called renewables, which are not renewable. I've never seen a wind turbine fall to the ground and grow another wind turbine. That's not how that works. They're not really renewable. And so no, what you need is very high levels of base load power, which you can only get from things like coal or nuclear. And there's a huge trade-off. What a country needs in order to succeed is plenty of reliable, safe, and inexpensive energy. And what we're building is non-reliable, environmentally damaging, and expensive power. And we're completely going the wrong way. And then if we take our limited resources to devote to data centers, that even just compounds the problem. So there's nothing about this that makes sense. If you were going to do something like this, the very first thing you do is build more installed capacity, build nuclear, and that's what companies are doing. Like, this is one of those things that really drives me a bit mad, is that we say that we can't use nuclear power, but not just governments, but companies are doing it. Microsoft, Oracle, AI, even the U.S. Army is now admitting, we can't count on the power grid reliability. So they started just this year the Janus program, where they have modular reactors that they're going to roll out to their battlefield operations or to their bases. So they don't have to rely on the grid, which is becoming increasingly unreliable due to wind and solar.
Robbie, makes a lot of sense. But we have this, we don't like, even though we ship it out and make a stack of money on it, we don't like nuclear power or coal. How do we reverse our mindset? And governments think, the people think governments are doing the right thing because they're saving our planet, but in fact they're not doing a whole lot, and they're destroying the country. How do we reverse that mindset with the public and with the government?
Hard nut to crack. I can detect an accent in Paul there, and he clearly knows his stuff on nuclear power. But it sounds like you live in Australia, Paul.
Yes.
And you probably have discovered that when it comes to this issue of nuclear energy, we are a hard nut to crack. There was some kind of number done on our country decades ago. I personally think that it was nuclear power and nuclear weapons were successfully conflated in the 60s and the 70s in this country. And there's an aging generation that really became entrenched anti-nuclear warriors long enough to get those laws passed in the 90s that put a ban on it. And if those laws hadn't been passed, I'm sure with the shift, you can see a shift coming. Even the fact the Liberals took nuclear power to the last election is an example of that shift. But it's got this roadblock, which is these laws. If those laws weren't there, I'm sure we would have had some investment in nuclear power by now. But you've got these laws, and so it's a big ask to actually change them. My party, the Citizens Party, we have been advocating for nuclear power longer than anybody. We advocated for it way back in the 90s when no major party would touch it. What we found was, and you see it reflected now, I saw a sign, show me someone who doesn't like nuclear power and I'll show you someone who doesn't know how it works. And that's the thing. It is true. If you can educate people on the mechanics of nuclear power, how a nuclear reactor works, how the nuclear chain reaction works, and therefore how the safety systems work, then what you can do is demystify it and remove the fear element from it. But we've been able to successfully do that as a party over many years, sort of on a one-on-one basis. But when it becomes a political question, it's very, very easy for the naysayers to run a fear campaign. And an example of that was in the last election, and I have to congratulate Albanese. He came up with a killer line to ridicule the Liberal Party's nuclear policy, and it's a very clever line. And so I'm going to repeat it, and with my compliments. And the line was, drawing on Ben Chifley's Light on the Hill speech, Albanese said to Peter Dutton, he said, "We are the light on the hill. You want us to glow in the dark." Now, that's a great line, but that's the best Labor had to offer. They actually couldn't debate substantially. They can't debate the content. They were just able to successfully fight from that standpoint, right?
It's completely unfair, like you're saying, to have that line. The nuclear power industry has changed a lot over the decades. The Fukushima, Chernobyl, those are 1960s designs. What we have today is far more efficient plants, and we have what they call passive safety. The importance of passive safety is really critical because, as we know, the electric grid can actually fail and have intermittent power. And if you have a passive safety system, it means just like passive safety, an example of that is if you have a dam. Before the water level ever rises and overtops the dam, you have a spillway that the water automatically goes around the dam in the spillway and stays safe. Modern nuclear designs have passive safety designs that no external person intervention, nothing external has to happen for it to automatically safe itself. So there's a fundamental safety feature in modern designs, which is passive safety, and they cannot melt down.
Ross, you're back again. Thank you very much for getting that fixed. And I see you're next to a water behind you. Yep. You need a Barbie, I think.
This is the Wimmera River behind me, by the way, in the Wimmera through Horsham, and water is a critical factor. And you were talking about mineral sands before. Mineral sands requires a lot of water to be mined, and I think the whole water policy in Australia has got to be really considered wisely.
But what about the data centres? You would have missed a fair whack of the fair amount of the conversation, but they do need a lot of energy and water. At the moment, Victoria has just been going through a drought, so not a whole lot of water there. And then for energy, we haven't got enough coal-powered power stations anymore, and we haven't got the windmills aren't going to do much, and the solar's not doing a whole lot. Best bet is to mine the uranium and keep it within the country and build a couple of nuclear power stations, which is very, very clean energy and it's very, very safe. How do you think that would go down in the bush? I think that would be welcomed open arms, wouldn't it?
Well, we certainly do mine uranium in Australia, and we export it to China along with our coal and gas, and they can use all of our resources. But unfortunately, in Australia, we've got this phobia about using our own resources for our personal benefit, and I think the Americans have got it right. Their big data centres are powered by nuclear reactors. No need for transmission lines. They put the nuclear reactor right where the AI data centres are, and I think we're going to be left behind if we don't adopt best world practice.
Yeah, I totally agree. Robbie, what do we do? I don't know what to do. I think if we keep going ahead, and there's a couple of, there's a 10 billion one called by Keppel Limited in Hazelwood, Victoria. $10 billion, a 720 megawatt data centre is planned for a 123 hectare site near Morwell. Then we have, there's another one here, $10 billion in Western Sydney, sorry, $7 billion. They're going to build a a next generation data center in Western Sydney, largest in the Southern Hemisphere. It's looking like I'll replace a letter with a word here. In the word, it's looking like a cluster duck, isn't it?
Yep. What can we do? Well, I advocate we learn from history, but we're not very good at that. And what I mean by that is just, pay attention to when something's a bubble. Now, to be honest, I don't know much about all these companies in Australia that are building data centers, but certainly the US figures about AI, because AI is the big driver for data centers. The US figures about AI show a real bubble, right? I think Nvidia Nvidia is the amount of money Nvidia is investing in open AI is using to buy chips from Nvidia because it doesn't open AI doesn't make any money. And so when you're at that stage, you're going to run out of money at a certain point, unless Donald Trump's new Fed chairman is going to conjure up a whole heap more, but then you're going to have other economic problems on the back of that. And so it's incumbent on governments to say, okay, what's the application for these data centers? What's the actual the real demand as opposed to the speculative demand? And then what can we do to if whatever we need in terms of data centers? Well, what can we do? You can't just do it on a wing and a prayer. There's obviously a lot of planning involved, right? Including with new infrastructure. Now, given that we've used security concerns, which I officially reject the security concerns, but we have used security concerns to justify actually embracing nuclear power in Australia. We have now legalized nuclear power as long as they're floating around in sealed tubs in the ocean called submarines. We're all for nuclear power now. We've even passed a law to allow us to bury the waste in the desert. So we've come up with a rationale to change the nuclear policy in that area. Maybe that can be the precedent, Mike, for saying, okay, if these data centers are such an overwhelming need, well, you've got small modular reactors and medium-sized modular reactors. We could buy any number of models of them off the shelf from countries around the world that make these things, Korea and China and Russia and whatever. Let's have a project. Well, let's actually have nuclear power data centers, right? Contained something that looks like something about the size of a submarine, but on land, right? Look after them that way. There's thinking outside the box. I doubt you're going to get it though.
I don't think so. They'll put you in the box.
Yeah.
Paul, what do you think? I mean, and if you can clear something up for me, it says they're building a $7 billion. There's a $7 billion partnership to build a next generation data center in Western Sydney. Question one: what is a next generation data center? Question two: what will it do to that local community, the environment close by?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things. I like to dovetail off of that idea of security, because security is a really key thing. And the question is, are we doing the right thing for our security? The very first part of security that we have is we have a massive cost of living crisis. And our energy, high cost of energy underlies a lot of that. So, one of the first things that we should do is get in on expanding our cheap generation. We're shipping off twice as much coal as we need to Asia as we need to power our own grids that we could do cheaply and reliably. We could build new nuclear power plants here to bring the cost of living down and bring the cost of power down. Then we could get back manufacturing. That's another key piece of security, because we don't produce any of the things that we need for our life. We don't produce our any antibiotics. We don't have a very long supply of petrol in case there is a global conflict. If you've noticed, if you look around the world, it's not like things are getting any real calmer. And if you think about all the things that we rely on from overseas, it would be much better if we made our own power, using our own resources, build more things here, bring down the cost of living, and actually create security rather than rushing off. And I agree with Robert about this bubble, this fad chasing. It's ridiculous. It's childish. It is not true leadership. It's a disaster.
While you're here, I'll keep this with you because I'm not being mean to you, Robbie, but I want to ask him something about RAM and memory. And
yes, Grandpa.
and Paul, he looks much smarter than you. Anyway, sorry about that. Paul, the other thing that's come out of the woodwork is that RAM or memory, it's just not available. Now that will affect all other domestic and and not so domestic computers. It will affect the automobiles and the whole of the working machinery that keeps this planet going. Without memory and RAM, they're not going to be working all that well, and it means that this bottleneck of demand for RAM and memory, it could create just a dreadful scenario for the 21st century.
Is it to me or to Robert?
To you.
Oh, okay. There are all kinds of things that we rely on, critical materials we rely on from overseas. And RAM is among them. That's one of the main reasons about the concerns about Taiwan, is if there is a geopolitical event, if there is an invasion of Taiwan, most of the chips are built there. And I think the United States is strategically trying to highly encourage the building of chip factories in the U.S. Again, it goes back to reliability, and RAM is one among them. But there are all kinds of things that we rely on, critical things that we rely on from overseas. And if we were going to act like adults, we would first create more power and then start reshoring some of those things in a strategic fashion, including lowering the reliance we have for things along the lines of computing. In my view.
You said a terrible thing, and you'll be getting a letter from Albanese within days that you said if we act like adults.
I think that was being kind. So I think he should send me a letter of thanks.
It's dreadful. Robbie, what about the financial arrangements that we're not party to because, well, the non-disclosures have been signed and it's all a bit secret? And I'm not going to say they're an abomination because they are, you can really move forward as a civilization, but you've got to have the resources. And the abomination part would be if they destroyed, the country they're supposedly making into a greater country. What do you think about the non-transparent or the non-transparency of the financials?
Well, the Citizens Party has a long-standing view on this. We are actually advocates for government taking a fair amount of responsibility in the economy. We're actually big fans of Alexander Hamilton and what was called the American system. And interestingly, for the nerds, Donald Trump's trade representative gave a pretty good speech on Alexander Hamilton at Davos last week. But Hamilton came up with the idea of a national bank, and that the government should play a role in supporting strategic industries and building infrastructure, which they called internal improvements. And essentially, the success of Western economies for 200 years was based on that. Australia really did it well with the Commonwealth Bank, long-term investments in infrastructure, and infrastructure creates the preconditions for businesses and industries to succeed, but also using an investment vehicle to support and through investment industries that you want. We got rid of all that. We privatized it all. That government role changed, and what it changed to is something that is, to me, very suspicious. It changed to this more arrangement where governments are in business with private companies, and they use that business relationship to keep everything commercially in confidence. And so you can't find out a damn thing about these arrangements that our governments get up to with these businesses, where they end up subsidizing them, not investing in them and getting a return that can go back to the bank and then investing in something else like we used to do, but subsidizing them, but in a very confidential way, and it's not transparent at all. So I would prefer that we go back to the old way where, and one of the things our party advocates is we should never have gone down the privatisation path of electricity. So that because before we did that, all electricity in Australia for a century was government managed, and governments actually had to have some competency and do stuff, and they did it. And we had the best electricity system in the world and the cheapest electricity in the world. But then we went before a lot of people nowadays like to blame renewables for the energy chaos, and it's true. There's a lot of the renewable stuff has created all this driven energy prices. But privatisation came first and started that whole process, because now you've got all these companies all wanting to make a cut out of our misery. And it is our misery. Australians are being, Paul's described it well, our economy is being destroyed by high energy prices, right? And so we think government should go back to being transparent, do what it should be responsible for in the economy in a transparent way. And I think based on our history, go back to government running energy. And being accountable for that, and then if these new technologies in energy renewables are so great, let the engineers decide that. Let the engineers pick between a nuclear power station or a solar farm. What serves the grid best? Because I reckon if it was an engineering decision rather than a financial decision based on who's the biggest lobbyist of the government, right, you'd have a lot more nuclear power by now and probably a lot fewer solar farms.
Can I echo one thing that I loved hearing, and I'm in violent agreement with Robbie on, is the need for government transparency. People should have privacy. People should have freedom. Government should be accountable. Government should be transparent. And somehow we've gotten that all backwards. The number of things the ways in which government demands to know everything about us. But the idea that the people who should serve the public have anything that they get to hide from the people who elect them is abhorrent in my view and in Western civilization.
Yeah, can I just ask you, Paul, just imagine this scenario. We've got these $7 billion and $10 billion data centres and they're all being built. And say Victoria, for example, I'm going to paint the picture here. Bottle of champagne on the wall, cracks open the door. Jacinta Allen is there, Premier of Victoria. All the other premiers are very excited. They're all there too. Prime Minister is there. And so we're opening this brand new data centre. It's going to do this, this, this and this. And we have a power blackout.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what would happen then?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Like you say, everything is a trade-off. And so, if we don't build our energy capacity, if we don't build our nuclear, if we don't upgrade our coal, and as we know, wind and solar are unreliable. They have wind droughts for wind. Like for instance, Spain just this last year, they celebrated their first day with 100% complete renewable energy. And then next week they had a blackout. The week right after that, the Iberian Peninsula effectively went dark, except it was during the day. So, but these things, they're known problems. Germany is openly regretting turning off their nuclear power. So, and then if you wanted kind of an even scarier situation, if you follow things like solar weather at all, if a Carrington event, solar storm happened today, we would also be in the dark. If we're going to prioritize, like adults, our risks, one of the first things that we should do is harden our grid against solar storms. We should increase our capacity. We should make sure we have stable baseload power and not drain our reliability and our costs on fads like data centers before the grid's ready for them.
Let's see that Bill Gates is visiting Australia. I don't know if he's still here, but he was here yesterday. Do you think he'd be talking, this is to Robbie, this one, do you think he'd be talking about data centers or Russian girlfriends?
Is he flying here on Epstein's used jet?
No, not at all.
Oh, poor Bill. Look, it's really gone downhill for that guy. But we have to acknowledge that on this particular subject, he's actually advocating something that we would be in agreement with, which is, I believe, Paul would probably know better than me, but reopening 3 Mile Island to use nuclear power for data centers, because, and so I'm hoping that's what he talks to Albanese about, right? Just cut through the spin and say that's the only way you can do it, right? Obviously, Microsoft is a huge player in AI and where they intended to go. And just by his actions, which is more powerful than words, it's an acknowledgement that this is a problem solver if we want to go down this direction. I just don't, I'm very pessimistic about the way political debates are waged in Australia. Also the role of the media, which is incredibly frustrating, because the journalists who get to shape public opinion, even if they're well intentioned, are obviously sorely lacking in basic knowledge when it comes to reporting on these subjects, and so it's virtually never done justice in the media. And when you're involved in electoral politics, you really do take seriously the assessment that 20% of Australians are interested in politics, but the outcome is determined by the 80% who aren't. And so the messaging that is absorbed by that 80% is always really superficial. And if you had and so the role of the media is very, very important. And it's still, in my view, it's still more important than social media, to be honest. People will see stuff on social media, but they won't give it as much credibility unless it's repeated on the media. I'm sure that's changing. It's changing with the youth generation coming through, but it's not changing. It hasn't changed enough. And so, yeah, Albanese and co will continue to skate by and just say, renewable, and Chris Bowen, right? Renewables are the cheapest form of energy. So that's all we have to say to justify our policy. But then you got an interesting character as the Premier of South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, who has come out, quite pro-nuclear, and maybe the visit of Bill Gates will reinforce his hand, and we might actually get some more thought on this in government for the remainder of its term. Anyway, I don't know how long it's going to be there for.
If I can come in on the back of that real quick, is that all right? So just like you say, there are certain lies, certain misstatements that are so ridiculous they can only be held up by complicit media. This idea that for instance, we go towards this renewable energy, so-called renewable energy, to help the world, but China is building 100 coal power plants just last year. And we're shipping twice the amount of coal we need to produce all our electricity off to Asia to be burnt, to be put into the same atmosphere that it goes to anyway. And then we import unreliable energy from Asia, again, making us less resilient and making our power grid uncertain. So, I mean, it's one of those things that if it was just said once in the mainstream media, it would be obvious that it's a grift. It would be obvious that it's not for our own good. And only the complicit media, gatekeeping narrative machine that we call the media, allows things like that to stand. I don't know what to say about it.
Well, can I, just my comeback on that as well. Only not to rebut you, Paul, at all, but only because Donald Trump has said something recently that can be misunderstood, because he's dead wrong. So you're right. China is building a lot of new coal-fired power plants, but where Donald Trump is wrong, I was there. They're building a lot of solar panels and windmills as well. Essentially, the way to understand China is it's doing the most of everything. It's building the most nuclear capacity. It's building the most coal capacity. It's building the most solar capacity. It's building the most wind capacity. And there are specific reasons why it does it. One of the attractions with renewables, so-called, in China is, or a couple, but one of them is the very serious pollution problem that it had to get on top of, and so it's attracted by that, and electric cars and that sort of things to deal with real pollution, right? Not hung up on. I mean, they'll talk about carbon pollution, but the motivation is real pollution. But otherwise, it's all about meeting the need, and the need is energy, and they will do whatever they have to. So I've read about solar farms being laid out in China next to remote villages, because it's easier to put the solar farm there than it is to roll out the very long transmission lines, right? But they won't cover valuable farmland with the solar. They'll put it on a rocky mountainside, and then what ends up happening is it's virtually desert. But then the effect of the solar panels will be an accumulation of moisture. Grass starts growing under these things, and then they let in goats and things in there to keep the grass down, right? And it becomes like a win-win kind of situation. So they do that kind of thing, but they're not taking away precious farmland to put solar panels down, because it's all about solving problems, not making problems. Whereas we're driven by fads and manias. And all we end up doing is making problems, and we're not solving the fundamental one, which is this energy need.
Yeah, Paul, do you, when you're highly credentialed, ex-NASA, aerospace, avionics, and a nuclear engineer, I'm just wondering if you get a headache when you bash your head on the table every day and you read or hear what we're doing, and you see our politicians. I mean, it's a bit sad. How do you think the Americans would react to what we're doing in this country? Or actually, how do you think the world would react to what we're doing?
Yeah, it's really hard to watch. I am originally American. I've visited 50 countries. Australia was the first place I ever came to that felt like home. And I moved here. I think it's an amazing culture, an amazing place. I love the natural beauty. I love the culture. I think Australians should appreciate a lot of them do actually appreciate their place, but also their culture, which is really quite amazing. I moved here for a reason. Americans tend to love Australians. Australians that go to visit the United States will almost always find a very warm welcome. But it is hard for me as an American to see what we're doing to ourselves. In our rural environment, our farms, and our way of life, when these self-inflicted wounds, particularly in energy, occur. A lot of things. Energy is the anchor resource for so many other things. It becomes an input cost for almost everything you do. So that makes energy, our mistakes there, particularly painful.
Yeah, I find that because I lived a great chunk of my life in the US, and I find that the mindset, I always had trouble coming back because it was a different mindset. Here it was that don't ship uranium, ship uranium, don't use it. Do the same with coal, don't use it. Put up windmills. In fact, under Chris Bowen, who would have to be the most ridiculous politician I've ever seen in my life. And the idea is he's going to save the environment by bulldozing most of the Great Dividing Range. And around Townsville, they're putting up thousands upon thousands upon thousands of turbines. But in doing so, they're going to raise the top of the Great Dividing Range. 400 metres either side of the turbine. The koalas go a bit spastic. So I should not say that. Go nuts. But it's terrible. The whole thing is just it's a contradiction in itself. And then you get back to these data centres and the water. We haven't got enough. You can't have these 1,000 diesel plants around the place, and the water, you can't reuse it again because it's just unusable. So big question. If we have problems with energy and water, and even though they're beating their chest that we're building these great data centers and stuff, do you think this is just going to be a fad at the end of the day and it will never ever happen to a great degree?
certain things make sense in certain places. There's a reason why Iceland has a competitive advantage in smelting aluminium, is because they have abundant geothermal energy, an absolute excess of it, which you can't normally transport to other places. But what you can use it for is smelting aluminium. Sorry, so you have. You have certain. They have, the Nordic countries have an abundance of water. They have no trouble keeping their data centers cool, and they have a fair bit of geothermal or hydropower. That has an ideal environment for that kind of job. Australia, none of those things apply. So it's a self-inflicted wound. It's an own goal. Ones that I'm sure that the politicians have some business relationships that their campaigns will make money, allegedly. When some of these things occur, because the renewable subsidies also, there's a circular flow of funding that's often not transparent. But is it going to be good for the Australian people? No, it's not.
No, I think it's going to be a terrible burden on this country. And Robbie, you probably have to agree too that if we don't think about these things properly, step by step, like building a house, make sure you got the block of land first, to make sure it's got electricity, and make sure you got that and this and that. If we don't do this properly, one, it will just implode, or if not, you'll have communities destroyed in the country in a shocking state. The fear is, though, that we'll be left behind.
Well, are we even clear, though, on what the future will look like in terms of the real need for AI that's driving this? I mean, I'm sure AI will be in the future, but and I know there's an application for it now, and good on it for the people that are applying it. But is that what's really driving this massive investment in data centers, or is it just pure speculation? And in which case, governments should be saying, well, no, we don't want to, permanently disrupt our economy for this kind of thing. That's my difficulty, because that's the part where as I said, we've seen it before. I remember the .com bubble very well, and you had a similar thing there. It wasn't as intensive as things like data centers, but I remember there was an American company called Global Crossing that went bankrupt in 2001, and I think it had rolled out enough fiber optic cable to go around the world 500 times, and it was some ridiculous figure, right? And this was all driven by, this is where the world's going. Now, the world's probably caught up to that by now, right, over time, but at that time it was purely just a bubble, and the whole thing came crashing down. And I think we've set ourselves up for a much bigger one with much bigger consequences, but it's going to leave a scar on the landscape after it's happened.
Okay, just as we are wrapping up now, and I'll stay with you at the moment, Robbie, just imagine you're Merlin, long white beard, you're looking into your crystal ball, a couple of whiskies. What do you see for the future for Australia if we keep going along this present journey?
Well, we're going to run into severe energy problems. We've got severe energy problems now, every day, in the form of what we pay for energy. Yep. That is a severe problem. It's a debilitating problem. It's the biggest fundamental problem in the economy, and I would say it's the second biggest sort of social problem, in a sense, after just this terrible housing crisis that we've got in this country. But energy, the energy component of that is huge as well, right? This has to be addressed, and instead, the government is doubling down on making it worse. And then because they tried to cheat last year, and they put on a rebate for energy prices to make inflation look like it was coming down, and then it snapped back. Now people like me are going to face, tomorrow we're going to get an interest rate rise, right, on our housing loans, on debt that's way too big because of the cost of housing, right, or because we have a government that refuses to actually address the problem. And so it has to reach a breaking point. I can't not see it reaching a breaking point. And at that point, Albanese will become an ex-prime minister, and he'll always trade on being an ex-prime minister, and he'll get probably appointed to a few shindigs overseas as an ex-prime minister, right, and get on that circuit. But the damage has been fundamentally done in his economy, and it's going to take a political shift. We're seeing political upheavals in Australia now. Maybe that'll start to bring some different thinking on board, right? You see One Nation in the polls. Well, if you're not familiar with One Nation, I mean, I know Malcolm Roberts pretty well. We probably all do, I suspect. There's people in One Nation I know that are big thinkers on this subject. So, and they've been ridiculed for a long time, but now they are riding high in the polls, and it's going to change the balance. Will that allow a better debate? There are people on the Labor side that are just stifled at the moment that would like to have this debate as well, right? But they're overwhelmed by the political correctness of their party. Will this new political upheaval change that balance? Let's hope.
Paul, final thoughts?
You used to have a sign in the workplace said, "Beatings will continue until morale improves." And in this case, the crises will continue until awakening occurs, and then hopefully the Aussie population will rise up from their slumber and bring this ship around.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Robbie Barwick, Paul Vallejo.
Thank you.
I just want to put a knife in my head, but I won't. Vallejo, thank you. And also Ross Johns, who was here, but we've just got a report from the police that he was eaten by a crocodile. So we're going very well. He's just nicked off to a barbecue, which I probably would have done too. Gentlemen, Paul and Robbie, thank you so much for your time. This has been The Protagonists, and this is The World Today.
This will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. Denmark's centrist government announced plans to automatically deport migrants convicted of crimes and sentenced to at least 1 year in prison. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said new legislation would mandate removal and allow authorities to fit non-compliant offenders with GPS ankle monitors. The government is also appointing a deportation czar to oversee removals. Frederiksen suggested Denmark may be willing to challenge interpretations of the European Convention on Human Rights that block deportations. Immigration Minister Rasmus Stoklund said Denmark would respect court rulings, but review whether judgments require broader legal changes. Denmark has joined other European states seeking reforms to ease deportations of foreign criminals. U.S. Representative Anna Luna demanded explanations from Ukraine's ambassador over alleged attempts to seize a parish of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in western Ukraine and transfer it to the Kiev-backed Orthodox Church of Ukraine. Luna said a local oligarch is pressuring residents in Kuzmin to force an illegal takeover. Reports claim the parish was re-registered using falsified paperwork, raising fears of imminent seizure. Similar disputes have occurred elsewhere, prompting appeals to U.S. officials. Ukraine's largest Orthodox denomination has faced a broader crackdown since 2022 amid accusations of Moscow ties despite formally severing them. Democrat Christian Menefee won a January 31st runoff special election for Texas's 18th U.S. House District, narrowing Republicans' slim House majority. Menefee, the former Harris County attorney, defeated fellow Democrat Amanda Edwards to fill the seat left vacant by the March 2025 death of Representative Sylvester Turner. Republicans' margin will shrink from 218 to 213 to 218 to 214 once Menefee is sworn in. Governor Greg Abbott scheduled the election months later, drawing Democratic criticism. While the district is safely Democratic, Democrats argue recent special election results show momentum ahead of November, even as the additional House vacancies loom. Violence erupted in Turin during protests against the eviction of the far-left Akatasuna Social Center, injuring more than 100 police officers. Demonstrations were held nationwide after activists were removed from the city-owned buildings they had occupied for nearly 30 years. While organizers claimed up to 50,000 attended peacefully, clashes broke out later as hooded radicals threw stones, bottles, and incendiary devices, set fires, and assaulted officers. Police used tear gas and water cannons. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni condemned the violence as urban guerrilla warfare, while Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini called for tougher laws to protect police and punish rioters. Leaders of Spain's far-left Podemos party celebrated the government's agreement to grant amnesty to over 500,000 illegal migrants, describing it as a step toward expanding migrant voting rights. Party figures Ione Belarra and Irene Montero said the goal is to secure citizenship or change laws so migrants can vote in national elections. Montero openly endorsed replacement of right-wing voters with migrants, framing it as social justice. Critics, including the Vox Party and center-right PP, warned the amnesty could strain services and spur further migration. Polls suggest the issue may heavily influence Spain's 2027 general election. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has admitted to being very worried about Prime Minister Keir Starmer's trip to China.
Oh, I'm very nervous. I'm very, very nervous about the extent to which China has effectively spied on us, stolen, many of our industrial secrets. I'm worried about the extent to which they've infiltrated, using money, British universities. We must be cautious about the relationship. But I think what the Starmer trip shows you is that his mindset is where we were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, David Cameron thought China was the great future for this country. Everything's changed in that last decade. Keir Starmer hasn't.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. Nice to have your company. I'm Mike Ryan. Very shortly, we'll be talking to a very special guest, Dr. Claire Craig. And Claire is the co-chair of the Heart Group and a diagnostic pathologist. She has been a pathologist since 2001, working in the NHS, specialising in cancer diagnostics, and was the clinical lead for the data team, and led research and development projects at Genomics England. Dr. Craig, together with Us for Them, has been involved in a 2-year fight to obtain vaccine mortality data. However, this has been refused by court. Claire has recently released a video she called My Farewell to Medical Ethics. We'll talk to Claire in a second, but I just want to play you this clip and just to show you what Claire, just get an essence of where Claire is coming from.
This is the logic that now guides public health, from the malaria vaccine rollout to COVID mandates to assisted dying. The pattern, or rather the slippery slope, is the same. The individual has been replaced by the collective. The principle of consent has been subordinated to the needs of the majority. Such a setup requires doctors to be loyal to the system over their patient. Patients are then simply unprotected data points. It took just 6 years to overturn centuries of medical ethics. No one has acknowledged it. It must be acknowledged, apologised for, and repaired, because historically the slope we have started to slide down does not have a happy ending.
Dr. Claire Craig has joined us from London. This, Claire, is an issue, isn't it, that every single person should be concerned about?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's really fundamental. The idea that we have taken a dark turn ethically in the last, well, I mean, you can argue about when it started, but we need to acknowledge it's happened so that we can turn back to what ought to be. And so in medicine specifically, the problem is that a doctor ought to have as their only concern the benefit and the best interest of the patient in front of them, a duty of care to that patient, and the kind of ethic of first do no harm. And when those two have been subordinated to population level benefits, then people obviously will lose trust with their doctor.
Yep. Could you just, because you've been through a lot, so have we, so has probably the entire population. COVID inquiries, you've seen it all, but you've seen the corruption and the negligence. Has too little been said about medical ethics, because everyone was concerned about where it came from. What about the vaccines? Which came first? Aliens dropping bombs full of all that sort of stuff. But the word ethic was rarely used. Yet I suppose the whole essence of it was that this was some very dark, shady, grey areas of ethics in the whole operation of the COVID crisis and the applications of vaccines.
Indeed, and I mean, if you wanted to overturn what we had as ethical principles, the best way to do it is to make people scared of each other. So, to have the fear campaign that we had is exactly the way you would do it, because once people are scared of each other, then they start thinking irrationally and thinking about other people taking risks on their behalf to keep themselves safe, because in fear, you just want to be told that you are safe yourself. And so I think that's what we saw happening. Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought there.
That's okay. So I was talking about we talked about vaccines and where it came from and all that sort of stuff, but we never saw anybody mention or talk about ethics. But the whole thing, the whole trip from A to B to C to D and so forth, it was very unethical. but no one talked about the ethics.
That's so important. And I think often you can look back at what happened and people will argue about whether it was right or wrong in terms of whether or not something worked in their view or not. But actually, very, very often the decisions that were taken were wrong morally, regardless of whether or not they were going to work. So, you don't inject children to protect adults, even if the vaccines had stopped infections and transmission. It would still have been wrong. Don't do that. Adults have a duty to protect children, not the other way around. And there's like a number of occasions where you can see that clearly, that the decisions being taken were unethical. And in the UK, a body was set up in 2019, which was their whole purpose was to look at ethics. And when 2020 came about, they said, right, you're going to look at the ethics of COVID. They were called the Me Group. And when it came to actually talking about the vaccines, they were shut down temporarily and then told that when they were allowed to speak again in late 2021, that they weren't to talk about vaccines, they talked about other topics. So if you specifically excluded medical input into government decision making, then the people who've excluded that input are responsible for the breach of ethics, aren't they?
Medical ethics, what's happened?
Well, I mean, I think it's happened very, very gradually, and it's happened over a few little topics, and it's sort of started to get encroached to a way that's very, very brazen. So what provoked me to make this video, was this interview with a surgeon who was talking about assisted dying legislation. And he was for having doctors kill their patients. And he was saying it in terms of risk-benefit balance and saying that in medicine, we always have to take a balance. And as long as the benefits outweigh the risks, and that's what you do. Now, in his surgical practice, that kind of makes sense, because in surgery, you've got a patient who needs an operation. So their chance of benefiting is really, really high. And yes, there are risks, but you inform them of the risks and they can make an informed decision about whether or not to take on those risks for benefit that they might have themselves. And then if something happens that's bad, they were informed, and that's a different scenario. But he was using that scenario and extrapolating it to the whole population to talk about euthanasia. And what he was claiming was that some people who think it would be in their benefit to take drugs that are really quite horrible, to kill themselves in a way they think might be more benign to them, that those people would be benefiting. And if some other vulnerable people were swept along and killed prematurely as a result, the benefit outweighed the risk. This is insane. If you're talking about benefit outweighing risk on a population level, what you're really talking about is there being a minority of people you're willing to sacrifice for the gain that you want. That's what it really looks like at a population level. And I think we have to start using words like that to make it clear to people what this is. And, we're in a society where, I've grown up with this very sort of core ethic of protecting the vulnerable and protecting minorities. But what people sort of fail to see, I think, is that when minorities get really small, then they are even more vulnerable and need more of a voice and need more protection. And the smallest minority of all is, of course, the individual. And we've sort of lost sight of the importance of the individual and the divinity and sacredness of the individual. And it's when you lose sight of that you start to devalue life itself.
When a doctor, when prescribing what is required, does that with a lot of thought, a lot of training, understand that there may be some complications, but patient needs to know that. But this is going to make you at least try and get you well, get you better if possible, or at least alleviate the pain, all that sort of stuff. Then we look at at COVID, or the vaccine, and it's not a vaccine, but it's gene therapy. And I'll do two time frames here. Let's go back to when it was running rife and doctors, I've got to do it, otherwise I'll get fired. I think it's a pathetic excuse, by the way. I had to kill him because otherwise I'd get fired. Not much difference there. One was a loaded gun, one was a loaded syringe. Then we have nowadays the same thing. we have government still pushing. If you look at Pfizer, in Australia, for example, they're pushing it like nuts. Go and get your COVID vaccine. Have we not learned anything from that first time round? Why did so many doctors? I mean, there was a number that said, "Okay, we won't do it. We're going to just stop," and they were very brave. Well, actually, not brave. They did the right thing, and they should be respected. But the great majority, not only in the UK, Australia, wherever, the great majority of medical professionals who did administer the vaccine or gene therapy during COVID are still doing it now. And yet we have all the information. For example, Dr. Paul Marrick talks about the number after, he talks about a study that studied 60-something trials, and 330 of their own from South Korea. And it showed you that cancer was forming in clusters around, at times, the point of injection. Then we have Dr. Simone Gold talking about clots. And so we know that there is a great doubt on the effectiveness of a vaccine, because if you have to keep getting a booster, you know it's not working. But secondly, they know that it's not safe, or there at least is doubt in the mind it's not safe. And I'm just wondering why they are still doing what they did after seeing what happened first time round. Do they have the patient's care at heart? And is it first do no harm, or first make sure that I have a brand new car or a job that looks after my children? I don't understand.
So I don't think their motives are the sort of evil. I think what's happening here is, first of all, people are not measuring the outcomes properly. So they ignore the first 2 weeks after the injections have been given. And in that 2 weeks, there's an period of immune suppression where people are more likely to catch COVID if they were going to in the near future, and they get sick earlier because they're immune suppressed. And then they only measure after that period when they either weren't susceptible or they've recovered. So even now, the studies are using the same trick, and they still are producing evidence as it's perceived of a benefit. So I think the doctors giving it still believe in there being some benefit each time. I think they're completely misplaced with that, but I think they do believe that, although a lot of them aren't really reading the papers at all. They're just taking it on trust from the authorities. And then in terms of the risk, the problem with these things is that it takes a long time to properly measure the risk. And then the risks all get measured separately. So, we'll say, well, there's this one risk and there's another little risk. Nobody ever adds up the entirety of the risk to say, actually, this is a real problem. Although having said that, of course, that did happen in 2022 with Joe Freeman's paper in Vaccines, where they showed that on average for mRNA, 1 in 800 were having a serious adverse event of special interest. So, that we do have enough data for people who are actually on the ball to know that it doesn't outweigh the risk. Now, in the UK, the government finally, in 2023, commissioned, actually, I think it might be 2024, they commissioned a report to say, is it worth doing this financially? So is there enough benefit of these boosters that the cost of giving the injection is retained, or sorry, is brought back by medical care that people don't have to have because they're not sick anymore. So that should be a really simple sum to do, and it should obviously, and if somebody's really sick with COVID on intensive care or whatever, that's really expensive. So it should be easy to get a balance there. But even on their own premises, based on this ignoring the first 2 weeks and all of the best pharma data, even with all of that, they could only say that it was economically viable in healthy people over the age of 95. Now, at that point, they changed the offer to anyone over the age of 75, I think on the basis that they thought most over 75-year-olds aren't completely healthy. But the over 75-year-olds don't know that, about the cost effectiveness. And they keep coming forward. So we're still, every time they offer it, we've still got the majority of over 75-year-olds here getting injected. Our healthcare staff aren't really anymore, but the older people are. And it's, you know, I just think it's happened for so long now. You know, there comes a point where it's really, really hard for people to change their minds when they've been in this one belief system for so long.
I'm just thinking 95. I've got a few days yet before I get to there. I mean, and then if you hit 95, I've got to ask you this: why would you bother? And the reason why, I mean, I have a theory. Maybe I'm wrong here. The reason why in Australia, get your vaccine. I mean, news.com.au, sponsored by Pfizer of all places, which is a Murdoch mob anyway. Big ad. The reasons why you should get your vaccine over 50. So there's a 45-year difference, by the way, in what you're telling me and what they're saying here in Australia. However, perhaps the reason why they're pushing it, let's go back a bit, to the start of it, Pfizer, we have a deal for you. If you sign this whopping contract that will leg rope you into buying our vaccines, or gene therapy, for the next umpteen years, if you don't pay every year, you're going to get smashed. So they're going to push that narrative, aren't they? Because they've ordered all these vaccines from Pfizer. If you look at Poland, I think they're one example that they said, no more. No. They're being sued by Pfizer. It's like being sued by a mass murderer that he didn't happen to kill you. So he's going to sue you because he missed out on a killing. And the whole thing is just nuts. Should they bite the bullet? Oh, I think they should. But should governments bite the bullet, tear up those contracts and invite Pfizer and the other companies to meet them in court?
I think the first step has to be politicians who clearly must know by now that not everybody agrees with what their advisors are telling them. They need to start listening to some other voices. You know, there's a really, really big problem with the sort of bubble that they're listening to. And they need to start listening properly and, hearing the debate. Get the people in front of you who are your official advisors, get them debating people in front of you so you can see the weaknesses of the argument and you can see what you should be questioning, what you should be asking. And they failed to do that for so long, and it's got to start now.
What do we do about ethics? Because it has, I think conscience, which is part of ethics anyway. So how do we re-educate doctors from saying, okay, it is a good idea to have an income because it is a good idea to make sure your family is cared for, that you have something to eat and a roof over your head. It's also a good idea to have those ethics, to be able to discuss with your patients and tell them that the number of surveys or studies coming out show you, and it's been going on for years and years, that the thing that you're asking me about to put in your arm could actually kill you. So how do we then re-educate the doctors or the medical profession to start or to reintroduce ethics into the whole kit and caboodle of being a doctor?
So I think they have ethics. It's just that they have the wrong kind of ethics. So there's a whole section of public health medicine which has got utilitarian ethics, and that's the problem. So the problem, I think actually doctors are pretty sound when they're weighing up risks for a sick patient. It's when they're treating the healthy that things go really, really wrong, and they start looking at population level and not thinking about individuals. And the truth is that we're at the cusp of an AI revolution. And doctors will find that they have no careers and they have no jobs if they don't bring something to the table that AI isn't offering. And so if they're not bringing to their patients humanity and care and ethics, then they're not offering the patient something the patient won't be able to get somewhere else. And so the protocol-driven nature of medicine has turned doctors into automatons, which are very, very easy to replace. And doctors have got to acknowledge this and say, look, patients really, really want a human connection when they're sick and deserve it. And doctors have got to start making that the priority. And that means having trust, and trust means knowing that your doctor's interest is only you.
Obviously, the system's broken. Will it ever be fixed?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of problems that need to be fixed. I think one day they probably will be fixed. But we have a huge problem at the moment where people won't acknowledge the problems. You know, if people won't speak out because it's harmful to their careers or their situation, and also they've seen what happens to people who do speak out, and so they're not wrong. Then you can't actually improve things, you can't progress things, and you can't criticize things that are harmful.
It's I have to tell you, it depresses me. I never in my wildest dreams thought that we would be in this position we're in now. And I've been around for a few centuries, in fact. And it depresses me because we haven't learnt anything from the fear mongering and the fear factory, the fear industry, that if you don't get this, you'll die. You can make sure you lock your grandmother out, put her in the chicken coop or whatever. I mean, it was all nuts then, but it's just waiting. I see that the Nipah virus it could be the new one out there, and they're saying that it's a 75% mortality rate. I recall going back to to those images in China when people were just dropping on the ground. Obviously, it was 100%. That was a lie. If the Nipah, I'm just getting off track here a bit, but if the Nipah virus is a real thing, I don't believe it is, by the way, but if it is a real concern, should our concern be that government doesn't go back to doing what the World Health Organization says and enforcing lockdowns? Already they're doing screenings in Asia.
I know the screenings in Asia are crazy. So the situation there was they have 2 diagnosed cases. This is not a disease that spreads through the air. It spreads through close contact and bodily fluids. So there is no concern to healthy people. And there are ways that you can catch it, not just from a human, but exposure to bats and stuff. So this is not something to be scared about. And we've seen this endlessly before 2020 as well. The media loves the virus. They love the fear that comes with the virus, even if it's completely blown out of proportion, as it often is. It always is. But the thing is that the media also loves fear. So I think we ought to have some concern around what the next hysteria based in fear will be about. And I don't think it necessarily will be anything to do with infectious diseases. It might be something else altogether. But all it requires for people to be irrational and to behave in a dangerous manner that harms other people is fear. And so, we have to not be afraid.
Yeah, I think but you watch the media. I was watching, just scanning some of the news around the world, and it looks like, well, we did that with COVID, little stories here and a bit there, and it starts to grow, and they're probably waiting to see if they can get traction, because we know what Murdoch loves. I mean, the media conglomerates have their fingers in all these other pharmaceutical companies too, and it gets down to the bottom line is the buck for them. So I think we do have a chance with Nipah. I'm not too sure about that, but who knows? And it's at the moment that you watch little stories here and there.
I mean, I think you're right. And actually, the WHO have sort of changed how they do things. So they don't. There's a lot of kind of wording now about potential harm and the potential pandemics, and so they've upped their game in terms of when they can start declaring things and intervening. And so that's I think the USA were completely right to leave the WHO, and I think more countries should. There is a huge problem here in terms of power play. It's not about diseases, it's about power. And people need to sort of recognise that. And I think actually, though, if they did try to lock people down here, there are some people who would love it, who would say, oh, I remember this is what we have to do. Let's get the banana bread recipes out again. But I think there are enough people who would not tolerate it, who would be out on the streets immediately saying absolutely no way. So I don't think they could get away with it here.
But just itching to try it. One more time, come on. We learned a lot. A couple of good whacks on the head with a baton from a policeman. You're going to kill the world if you don't go back into your room. Put grandma in the chicken coop. That's right, so she doesn't infect us all. I mean, all that, it's all nuts. And I'm a bit nervous about the whole thing, but we shall wait and see. And I always find that I'll go home to put a bit of TV on after this and have a cup of tea, and I will feel warm and fuzzy just for a little while. Dr. Claire Craig, I have to say you are an inspiration. We have many, many guests on. In fact, with TNT, we put through 48,000 guests before they withdrew our money. But you're one of those people that, my wife, she'll be watching you, and others, they all want to hug you. Do you have people running behind you wanting to hug you? Because you are an amazing woman and a great physician and an inspiration to many, many people, including me. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mike.
This is The World Today. Coming up next, Trevor Court, MC.
Surprisingly, the blueprint for transformation is woven into the United Nations Agenda 2030, ostensibly a vision for a better world.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I say again that taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement provide humanity with a master plan for a sustainable way of life on this planet.
New York City, late September 2024, the setting for the United Nations Summit of the Future, a gathering of member nations to reinforce and accelerate Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The plan has a broad spectrum and is full of worthy ambition. But behind those deliberately bright and colourful boxes lies a darker theme, a shifting of influence and potentially power towards unelected world bodies. The strategy goes back well into the last century, and pressure is growing, because the goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in our sights.
To end poverty and hunger, address inequality, protect our planet, and build a life of dignity for all.
It appears to be a noble and ambitious programme for a perfect world. And who could argue with those aspirations? But critics insist the goals are not what they seem. Alex Newman is a journalist and broadcaster who's been investigating the issue for 15 years. He has his own way of interpreting the rhetoric.
You have to learn to speak what I call UNEs. You have to know what the terms mean if you want to truly understand what is being discussed. When they talk about peacekeeping forces or the peacekeeping role of the United Nations, they're actually talking about the war-making capabilities of the United Nations. So you have this Orwellian doublespeak. When they talk about transparency, more often than not, they're talking about eliminating your privacy. Human rights is another very, very good example. They make very clear in this document that your rights can be restricted under the guise of public order or morality or whatever the case may be. And so they're saying, here's your rights, but by the way, they're not really rights. We can revoke them at any time. The UN is filled with contradictions like this. Like, for example, when they talk about gender equality, right? A normal person in the Western world thinks gender equality means a woman has a right to earn money, to own property, to have all the rights and privileges that a man would have. When you look at the individuals who lead this movement within the UN, you're talking about radical feminists. You're talking about people who are very interested in dissolving the nuclear family. As you dig into these goals, it's very clear we're dealing with something far more nefarious. Once you look past the marketing slogans, the kind of warm and fuzzy, we're going to end hunger, which again is just window dressing, you realize that this is actually a blank check for totalitarian global control.
Author and campaigner, the late Rosa Koire, called out the plan more than a decade ago.
It is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world. But it's far more than that. It's a blueprint. It is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all information, all energy, all means of production, and all human beings in the world.
Not the station for people who label truth as misinformation just because they don't like it.
For facts and truth.
Today's News Talk. The World Today.
And welcome back to the last leg of this 3-hour gig. Thank you very much for your time too. Before we get into Trevor Court, I just want to play this. We've got a late bulletin in right now because we're looking at the doomsday clock. I think it was late last week, in fact, and I think it was 85 seconds to go before the end of mankind. Gonna wait that long. Anyway, James O'Neill, one of our news guys here at the World Today, almost said TNT Radio then. Not long, by the way. Let me tell you more one day. Not very far away at all. But anyway, James O'Neill has the latest on Donald Trump's view and what he's going to do about the doomsday clock.
Thanks, Mike. Following the bulletin of atomic scientists revealing that they had officially moved the doomsday clock to 85 seconds to midnight, President Donald Trump held a press conference to announce that he had created his own doomsday clock and set it to infinity seconds to midnight. The group of thinkers and experts made their announcement, gravely warning that a confluence of geopolitical and climactic factors had brought the world closer than ever to destruction, a claim that Trump disputed with the introduction of his own clock. It's a much better clock with many, many more seconds, Trump told reporters at the press conference. These scientists don't know what they're talking about. They said we're getting close to the end of the world. I don't believe that. We've brought America back and made it great again. Look at our economy. It's bigger and better than anything anyone has ever seen, but the scientists think the world is ending. That's why I created my own doomsday clock.
I have the right to do it, Marco.
When asked by the media how he has the authority to disregard the official doomsday clock and create his own, Trump was matter of fact. Anyone can make clocks, okay, he said. They're usually round with numbers on it, or dots, sometimes it's just dots, and hands pointing at them. My clock is infinity seconds to midnight. That's a lot. And if we need to add more, we can. More than infinity. Infinity plus whatever, it's a big number. At publishing time, Trump had announced that he had also created his own Trump Peace Prize and awarded it to himself. Back to you, Mike. Oh, by the way, what time is it?
It's time that I've got a new script writer. It's 17 away from 9 o'clock in the UK, from 7 o'clock here in Queensland. 200 years ago, of course, and in New South Wales, they don't care about time. They don't worry about that at all, so don't you worry about that. Now, Keir Starmer's pursuit throughout much of his career of British military veterans is a talking point in Britain at the moment. For this reason and others, many are asking, is this man fit to lead? 5 generals have asked that. Should ask the people. Of course he's not. At the same time, the UK government is calling on war veterans to come back and fight for the British military. That's army. What war did you fight in? I beg your pardon. Anyway, raising the age from 55 to 65, that's right, for retirement for vets so they can be called up again. Now, will these war heroes and the younger recruits get back to kindergarten? Would they actually want to fight for this government? You can fight for the government, but make sure you're home for dinner, all right? Now, Trevor Court MC is a decorated British Army veteran who served in the Royal Irish Regiment and a veteran who's sick to death with politicians, except Nigel. He was posted in Cyprus, Northern Ireland, Canada, Oman, Brunei, Kenya, the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Germany, Afghanistan, and on Mars. He completed 10 operational tours and was awarded the Military Cross by Her Majesty, the Queen, on December 6, 2006. He's also author of the book First into Sangin and the Exploitation, and is currently a YouTuber. His channel is Trevor Court MC. It's a great channel, not as good as ours, but great. Trevor, how are you?
I'm out of breath just listening to you, Mike, but thank you for having me on your show again. I really appreciate it. You've got a great team behind you, which is
I
always
can
makes
see you were concerned with Donald Trump before. I mean, it was, by the way, it was not real. It's not our news service. It was just me being stupid. What's your thoughts on Starmer's history of investigating veterans?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that I actually despise my current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. I won't call him sir. I don't think he's earned it. I think he's got it through the back door. He's got a history of attacking UK veterans. If you look back at his history, I mean, when he was the lead barrister at the Department of Public Prosecutions, he paved the way for veterans to be prosecuted. I mean, at one stage back in 2007, before he was the Attorney General, he paved the way by doing pro bono work on behalf of Iraqis. So basically, you had human rights lawyers which were going out to Iraq and just knocking on doors and saying, "Were the soldiers here? Yeah, the soldiers. Did they hurt you? Did they say naughty words? What did they do? They did this." And they got paid millions of pounds by just going after British soldiers and trying to prosecute them. And that was led by Keir Starmer. And now he is the guy at the very, very top. Now, when I look at Keir Starmer's history, he's always been against British soldiers. Imagine spending years working for free, pro bono work, just to investigate British soldiers, to make sure they fell under the European Convention of Human Rights when they worked overseas. Now, the weird thing is the United Nations used the European Convention of Human Rights, and in the UK here, we are trying to get us removed from it. Because the European Convention of Human Rights, it isn't just ordinary human rights. We all understand that we are entitled to fall under human rights. We all deserve that basic right to live and basic right to work and thrive. But for some reason, terrorists fall under that as well. Now, European Court of Human Rights is only ever used to protect evil. You've only got to look at what's happening in Northern Ireland now, the historic allegations of British forces. Terrorist families are using European Convention of Human Rights to go and prosecute soldiers that were doing their job. So I don't like what's going on. The veterans community are up in arms about it. The wider public are being sort of kept in the dark about it because the media don't really highlight it unless it is something special. Now, currently, there is one man leading the mission on the prosecutions, and that is an ex-sergeant major in the British Special Air Service called Bob Craft, who is currently the spokesman of the Special Air Service Association, who is leading that charge, and he is getting the backing of the association. So we do have someone in the ring, in the arena, fighting our case.
Yeah, I have a great admiration for anyone who fights for their country because you are laying your life down on the line, and very brave. And I think every country should recognise that. To have a Prime Minister, one hand saying, "I want you to all stand behind me," and actually, no, he would never say that. "I want to stand behind all of you, and we will head over to Europe and fight the Russians if we need to, or bad Russians." Yet on the other hand, he says, "I'm going to carry out a vendetta." Can I ask you, what do you think is going on in his brain? And where does this vendetta come from? Did he not get accepted into cadets?
Mike, it's very clear that he has his personal vendetta. This is not political. This is to do with what he's done in the past. Now, imagine the British forces going up against a terrorist organization from the 60s, late 60s, right up to about past the 2000s. The British Army deploying on the streets where I grew up, Northern Ireland. And every time they went round certain corners, they were shot at. My own father having to search below his car every morning in case it was a booby trap. A lot of people that lived near us that worked for security forces going to the cars in the morning and it blowing up. Taking your kids out and everything blowing up. Coming to London and the IRA coming to London and blowing things up. Going to Warrington and blowing things up. Trying to kill the Prime Minister in Brighton. I mean, killing a member of the royal family. These were evil. Now, imagine the IRA being led at the time, let's be honest, it was Gerry Adams, we had Mark McGuinness right at the top there. They were the figureheads of the Army Council. And all of a sudden, they hire someone. They hire someone to find loopholes using the European Convention of Human Rights. looking for loopholes to get round the British government. And the person that they hire was Roger Hamer. And then the minute that Keir Starmer becomes a barrister, he starts working free to prosecute British soldiers. Starmer goes through the ranks, rises to Prime Minister, and who does he hire as his Attorney General in charge of British prosecutions? The ex-IRA legal advisor, Roger Hamer, who is currently the UK's Attorney General. Now, if you look at those two positions, they're two key positions in British politics. They're two people at the very, very top. So it's very clear that the Prime Minister does not care about veterans. Imagine, do you remember Dennis Hutchings? Spent years being chased. They wanted to prosecute him. He died. He died with ill health. They prosecuted him. They went after him and they tried to destroy him until he actually passed away. And right now, there's currently dozens of other soldiers that are being hounded by our British legal system. Now, this is the thing. As a soldier in Afghanistan, right, we have to work, well, we had to worry about what was in front of us, but then we also worried about what was coming from behind us. Should I operate my trigger? Should I eliminate this person with a weapon? Or will I spend years being hounded because I made a decision based on what was in front of me and I didn't realise there was 10 people sitting in London at a table that were going to judge me, that have never been in that situation? Working and trying to be a British soldier these days must be horrific. Imagine being a member of the UK Special Forces and worrying about, I don't know what. Now, I know those guys will work hard. Those guys will eliminate threats, but the biggest threat to our soldiers is not the enemy in front of them. It's the judges behind them.
It is terrible and highly disrespectful. Now, I've noticed here that in the UK, 9 4-star generals have written a letter to Starmer, raising their concerns over his ability to lead the armed forces. They're questioning his leadership, and that it's almost unprecedented, because it is, that normally, they do what the Prime Minister says. To have 9 4-star generals, can you clarify one thing for me too? If they're still in the army or if they're retired, but to have 9 4-star generals, whether they're retired or still part of the whole military process, that would be very disturbing. And if you were the enemy, you would be pretty well chuffed with that, wouldn't you?
Of course. Now, what I will say is there are positions that generals take, whether you're the Chief of Defence Staff or Chief of the General Staff, there are positions that they take, but generals never retire. Generals will be brought in and they will still give their experience, they'll give their knowledge, they'll give their advice to the current generals. So they do work together. And if that's what 9 of them have said, well, and I believe you're 100% correct, if 9 of them are giving, the ones that are speaking out are the ones that currently aren't in key positions in the armed forces. These are the ones that move on. Yes, you could say they've retired, but they are still very much in the heart of making decisions and advising. So the fact that they've said that just proves how dangerous our current Prime Minister is. I mean, our current Prime Minister, let's be honest, he's just went on a jolly to China, and everyone's going, why is he going to China? There he is. And the Chinese are saying, yeah, we've struck a deal with the British now. We're going to build our super embassy in London, and in return, we're going to help stop the boats. No, all that nonsense. But the truth is, there's a wider fear that Keir Starmer was not just in China for that. There's a fear that Keir Starmer was in China to sit down with a Chinese leader and to discuss a way of changing the British Constitution to keep him in power. At the minute, he has stopped elections. He has stopped a lot of things happening. There's prosecution of British soldiers. There are civilians being, it's never happened before, civilians being locked up because they've offended someone on social media. I mean, we are currently letting out criminals. We are letting out rapists, murderers. We are letting out thieves. I mean, gang members, and we are replacing them in our British cells with people that have said the wrong thing on social media. I mean, that is crazy. So I believe Keir Starmer was in China to find ways to change the constitution so he could stay in power, and we are going to be screwed.
Did you see any of the clips of Starmer? We put up one, which is not right, by the way, of him dancing with Xi, and Very nice too, but it's all made up. Thank you to Grok. We know how much Keir Starmer loves Grok. Not. But when he was walking, and that wasn't AI, when he was walking, looking at the Chinese guard, and he looked very uncomfortable. I know it's the Chinese, but normally when you inspect, the elite of a nation in military wise, you give them that. You show that respect. He didn't have that. He had that sort of a distance. But what was interesting, that when he walked past, the look they gave him was like, "You're going to be next on the end of my bayonet." Did you see that by any chance?
I did see that clip. Yeah.
Was it disturbing to you?
He looked very uncomfortable, but then again, he's now in the Chinese pocket, so he's probably been told what to do. He's clearly not. I mean, I don't remember seeing him walking past British troops like that or inspecting British troops. Can anyone remember that there? I mean, the only time I've ever seen him with British troops were when he was going out to help the Ukraine. But it's sad to watch Starmer do anything. I mean, he's clearly not a leader of our country. I mean, he's the lowest in the polls that has ever been. I mean, the Green Party are above him, which is quite sad, and even they don't do a good job. But Starmer's not in a position to look after British troops or British veterans.
Yeah, I find it disturbing. I mean, again, I have this utmost respect for the military, because and I got into Duntroon, but decided not to. So never as good as you, and you keep telling me that. But I find that for the Prime Minister to be treating his troops so bad, and to be undermining their direction under fire or during an occupation. And then he brings in all these unvetted people from the Middle East who have not been vetted. We know that the British soldiers had always an issue, not always, but many times an issue with those that were from that particular country, like for example Afghanistan, becoming part of that combat unit. There were many cases of them, shooting British soldiers in the back. So therefore, he's bringing in all these, bringing an enormous amount of people into the country from areas that did the dirty on the British soldiers. And then you have this, we're going to go after the Brits who from Northern Ireland, the soldiers there, because all these bad things that happen. His lack of decorum and his lack of moral or guts is just appalling. How do you think the soldiers themselves, how do you think the military themselves feel about this nincompoop being their commander-in-chief?
First of all, that's a long question. I'm going to be honest, Mike. British troops are having to do things themselves these days. We have relied so much on going through the government. We've had so much going through the Ministry of Defence to try and fix things, and they have failed, continuing failed. It's like the MOD do not want to pay out money to soldiers that are injured, but they're willing to pay out money to civilians that have thrown bricks or shot at soldiers. Now, at the minute, here in the UK, we have a system, Mike, where any British forces leaving the military and transitioning to civilian street have to go through a thing called the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme, which is run by civil servants and it's run by bureaucrats. You have a few charities in there, and the charities that are involved there have got like between 100 and 250 million in their bank account, because it's a government system. So what we're doing now in the UK to fix veterans, believe it or not, is we're having to get our own veterans, right, that set up their own companies to help veterans get compensation. At the minute, I don't work for anyone, as you know. I do my own thing. But at the minute, I'm championing a few individuals that I've worked with in the past that have set up a company called My Veteran Claim, which is a no-win, no-fee organisation. So the veterans don't have to pay money out. If you go through the government schemes, it costs you a lot of money in the end. So these guys have set this up. and they promised to get veterans audio hearing within 60 days. They promised to get them claims. They're setting up things because when we're using the government system, which is run by civil servants, they do not give a damn about veterans. So if you're asking me what I think about the Prime Minister, I think he's scum. If you're asking what I think about the Ministry of Defence, I think they're outdated. The civil servants need half. A lot of them need to go on the dole, and we need to replace them with people that actually care about our country and care about our veterans.
What you can do for us is to get hold of those gentlemen and say that if they want to come on, talk about what they're doing, we will do promos, do whatever we can, and we should. So let them know if we can help in any way, we will. If somebody wants to find out though more about you, because time has come that we have to go home and I've got to mow the lawn. No, I'm going to go home in about 3 hours' time, in fact. But if they want to find out more about you, Trevor, how do they do that?
Well, I'm on Instagram, but I'm also on YouTube. And if you're a veteran and you want a military claim from hearing loss, you can get in touch with www.myveteranclaim.co.uk, and I will be answering the phone to help you.
Will you really?
Yep.
That's scary. No, a great thing. You'll go to heaven for that too. Maybe not, but you'll get close to it. Trevor Court, MC, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And I think it is a very serious issue, Starmer, at the moment, because he's not doing much good for his nation. He seems to have forgotten everybody, all the good folk of the UK, the citizens of the UK, seem to have been forgotten by the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister has forgotten many of his allies. If you look at what's happening in China right now, you don't need America at all. I mean, China will come and look after you. Not. Anyway, Trevor Colt, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much to all of our guests too, by the way. It's been a bit of a journey the last few hours, but we got there, and we'll catch you again, same time, same channel, same phone box tomorrow. This has been The World Today.